The sound came first. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. Beep, beep, beep. Inside the neonatal intensive care unit at Mercy Hospital in Chicago, the air felt too clean, too bright, too controlled. Machines hummed softly. Nurses moved with practiced precision. Clear tubes carried oxygen. Screens glowed in soft blues and greens. Karen stood frozen beside an incubator. Her hands rested on the edge of the plastic casing, knuckles pale from how tightly she gripped it. Inside, her newborn son lay swaddled in white hospital cloth, his chest rising in uneven rhythm. A tiny oxygen tube rested beneath his nose. His fingers were no larger than the tip of her thumb. The monitor above him flickered. Beep, 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 beep. A nurse glanced up. Karen's eyes followed the numbers. She didn't understand the medical terms, but she understood tone. The nurse's shoulders tightened. Another nurse stepped closer. One of them adjusted a dial. The oxygen percentage dipped. Karen swallowed. "Is he okay?" she asked, her voice barely steady. The nurse forced a reassuring smile. "We're monitoring him closely." Monitoring. That word felt thin, like it was trying to cover something bigger. The doctor entered quietly, reviewing the chart on a tablet. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. But his expression carried urgency disguised as calm. "He was born 5 weeks early," the doctor said gently. "Premature lungs sometimes struggle. We're seeing some fluctuation in oxygen saturation." Karen nodded, even though the medical explanation blurred in her ears. She wasn't thinking about terminology. She was thinking about how she had held him less than 12 hours ago. She was thinking about how small he felt against her chest. She was thinking about how she whispered, "We're going to be okay." The monitor dipped again. Beep, beep. One nurse pressed a button. Another adjusted the oxygen flow. The doctor stepped closer to the incubator. Karen's heart pounded in rhythm with the machine. "Talk to him," one nurse encouraged softly. Babies recognize their mother's voice. Karen leaned forward, her breath fogging the clear plastic. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "It's Mommy. I'm right here. You're strong, okay? You're stronger than you know." Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. She had promised herself she wouldn't fall apart in front of him. Not now, not here. The oxygen reading stabilized for a moment, then dipped again. The doctor's tone shifted slightly, still calm, but firmer. "We may need to perform a minor procedure to help regulate the murmur." Karen blinked. Murmur? A small irregularity in his heartbeat. "It's not uncommon in premature infants. The procedure is safe. But we shouldn't delay." Safe, not delay. The words pressed against her chest. A nurse handed the doctor a clipboard. He scanned the paperwork, then looked at Karen. "We'll need authorization from both parents." The room seemed to shrink. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, indifferent to the silence forming between the doctor and Karen. Karen's fingers tightened around the incubator edge. Both parents. She didn't move, didn't blink. The doctor continued carefully. "Is the father present?" The oxygen monitor dipped again, as if punctuating the question. Beep, beep. Karen stared at her son's tiny face. The last time she had spoken to Elysian replayed in her mind. The riverfront, the oak tree, the words she never thought she'd hear. "We can't do this." The sound of those words echoed louder than the machines in the room. The nurse shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am?" the doctor asked gently. "We'll need him here to sign." Karen inhaled slowly, her throat tightening. 7 months ago, the man who promised forever walked away from her while she carried this child. 7 months ago, she stood alone under the Chicago sky, trying to understand how love could disappear so quickly. Now she stood alone again. Except this time, it wasn't just her heart on the line. It was her son's. The oxygen numbers flickered. The doctor waited. The nurses waited. And Karen realized something terrifying. The one person she never wanted to call again was the only person who could authorize the procedure that might save her baby. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were steady. "Give me a minute," she said quietly. The machines continued their rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. And for the first time since giving birth, Karen felt the weight of a decision she thought she would never have to make. The doctor stepped a little closer to Karen, lowering his voice as if gentleness could soften what he was about to say. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began carefully, "the procedure itself is routine for cases like this. It's quick, and our neonatal team performs it often. But legally, we need authorization from the father listed on the birth record." Karen didn't answer. Her eyes remained on her son's tiny chest, rising and falling beneath the thin hospital blanket. "We've already prepared the consent forms," the doctor continued. "We just need his signature." Signature. Such a simple word. Ink on paper. A name written in cursive. But that name belonged to someone who hadn't been here when the contractions started. Someone who hadn't been there when she gripped the hospital rails through labor. Someone who hadn't heard their baby's first cry. Karen finally looked up. "He's not here," she said evenly. The doctor nodded, patient but firm. "Then we'll need him contacted immediately. Time matters." A nurse stepped forward with a clipboard. The father listed is Elysian Hartley. Hearing the name out loud felt heavier than expected. Elysian. It had been months since she said it without bitterness. The monitor above the incubator flickered again. Beep, beep. The doctor held her gaze. "We can't proceed without him." The room fell quiet, except for the steady pulse of the machine, a reminder that waiting wasn't neutral. Waiting had consequences. Karen swallowed hard, because now the man who walked away from her was standing between her child and a medical decision. The nurse held the clipboard a little lower, as if even she sensed the shift in the room. Karen stared at the blank signature line. Father's name, Elysian Hartley. Her throat tightened. The doctor waited respectfully, but the urgency remained beneath his calm expression. "Can you reach him?" he asked gently. Karen let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her chest for months. "He left," she said quietly. The doctor didn't react. He simply listened. Karen's voice dropped further, barely louder than the hum of the machines. "He left us." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't loud. They were simple, honest, but they carried 7 months of unanswered calls. 7 months of ultrasounds attended alone. 7 months of pretending she didn't still check her phone at night. A nurse shifted her weight uncomfortably. The oxygen monitor flickered again. Beep, beep, beep. Karen leaned closer to her son. "He doesn't even know you're here," she whispered to the baby. "He doesn't know how strong you are." Her finger gently pressed against the incubator wall. The doctor cleared his throat softly. "I understand this may be complicated," he said carefully. "But right now, our priority is your child." Karen closed her eyes. Complicated didn't begin to describe it. The man who chose ambition over family was now required to sign a paper to protect the family he walked away from. Silence filled the space between them. Only the monitor spoke. Beep, beep. And Karen realized something she never thought she'd accept. No matter how much pain he caused her, she might still have to call Elysian. Manhattan. 43 floors above Midtown, the conference room overlooked the Hudson River. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a skyline built on ambition. A polished walnut table stretched the length of the room. Screens displayed financial projections in sharp digital graphs. Elysian sat at the head of the table. Dark suit, controlled expression, hands folded neatly in front of him. "Closing this acquisition puts us ahead of 3 competitors," he said evenly. "We move now, or we lose market dominance by 4th quarter. Around him, executives nodded. The air carried the scent of espresso and expensive cologne. Legal teams flipped through binders. Assistants typed notes quietly. Elysian's phone vibrated against the table. He didn't look at it. He continued speaking. "If we hesitate, the valuation drops. We can't afford hesitation." The phone vibrated again. A quick glance this time. Unknown number. Chicago area code. He turned it face down. "Let's stay focused," he said firmly, redirecting attention to the slide presentation. Another vibration. Then another. The screen lit up briefly before dimming. Mercy Hospital. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He didn't pick it up. He cleared his throat. "As I was saying, buzz." Again, one of the board members raised an eyebrow. "Elysian," someone muttered quietly. "You might want to get that." "It can wait," he replied smoothly. The phone stopped vibrating. Silence returned. For exactly 8 seconds. Then, it rang. Not a vibration this time. A full ring, cutting cleanly through the polished room. Alishan stared at it. Mercy Hospital, Chicago. The name lingered on the screen. He felt a strange tightening in his chest. Not fear exactly. Not panic. Something else. Recognition. He declined the call. "Apologies," he said, sliding the phone into his suit pocket. "Let's proceed." The presentation resumed. Graphs, numbers, market strategy. But his focus fractured, because no hospital calls repeatedly unless something matters, and no one in Chicago would be listing him as emergency contact unless... His pocket buzzed again. Voicemail. He shifted slightly in his chair. The numbers on the screen blurred for a moment. He forced himself to listen to the CFO outlining growth projections, profit margins, expansion strategy, investor confidence. The life he chose. Yet beneath the table, his hand tightened around his phone. Mercy Hospital didn't stop calling. And somewhere in Chicago, a decision was waiting for him. The meeting finally paused for a short break. Chairs scraped softly against the polished floor. Executives stepped out to take calls. Assistants refreshed coffee. Alishan remained seated. He pulled his phone from his pocket slowly, staring at the notification. 3 missed calls. Mercy Hospital 1 voicemail. His thumb hovered for a moment. Then he pressed play. The room around him felt distant as the recorded voice filled his ear. "Mr. Hartley, this is Mercy Hospital in Chicago. If you are the father of baby Orion Hartley, please contact us immediately. Your authorization is required for a medical procedure. Time sensitive. Please call us back as soon as possible." The message ended. No background noise. No emotion. Just urgency. Father of baby Orion. The words echoed in his mind. He hadn't heard that name spoken out loud before. Orion. His son. Alishan's grip tightened around the phone. The skyline outside the window suddenly felt irrelevant, because 7 months ago, he walked away from a future. And now that future was calling him back. At this exact moment, 2 cities held their breath. In Chicago, a premature newborn lay beneath soft hospital lights, his oxygen levels rising and falling in uncertain rhythm. A mother stood beside him, forced to choose between pride and survival. In Manhattan, a CEO stared at his phone, confronted by a responsibility he once rejected. 7 months earlier, Alishan made a decision that felt practical. Career first, control first, timing first. Now timing was no longer his. Now the question wasn't about market value or shareholder confidence. It was about a heartbeat, the kind you can't negotiate. The kind that doesn't wait for quarterly reports. Karen believed she had closed the door on the man who left her standing by the river. Alishan believed he could move forward without looking back. Both were wrong. Because sometimes the life you walk away from doesn't disappear. Sometimes it grows. And when it needs you most, it calls. The only question now, will he answer? Let me ask you something. If someone walks out on you during your hardest moment, do they deserve a second chance when life forces them back into the picture? That's the real question here. Because this isn't just about a hospital call. It's about responsibility. It's about fear. It's about what happens when love collides with ambition. And before we go any further, I need you to do something important. If stories like this hit you, if real life choices and consequences matter to you, take a second right now and hit the like button. It helps YouTube push stories like this to more people. And I want you to comment below, yes or no. Does someone who walks away deserve redemption? Don't just watch this story. Be part of it. Now. Welcome back to Mr. Michael's Stories. If you're new here, I'm Michael, and this is where we dive into stories that stick with you. The kind that make you think, feel, and see the world a little differently. Whether you're here for true tales, creative fiction, or something in between, you're in the right place. So get comfortable. And before we jump into how this love story began, please hit the subscribe button. It helps us share powerful stories like this on YouTube. Because what happened between Alishan and Karen didn't start in a hospital. It started with music. And a choice neither of them thought would change everything. Before there was a hospital room. Before there was a voicemail. Before there was a child fighting to breathe. There was music. On the south side of Chicago, the air carried rhythm like it belonged there. Bronzeville didn't rush its evenings. It settled into them. Streetlights flickered on slowly. Neighbors called out to one another across porches. The scent of grilled chicken and sweet corn drifted from backyards during warm months, and laughter carried further than traffic. Karen grew up inside that rhythm. Sunday mornings meant church hats and pressed dresses, gospel harmonies rising from wooden pews, older women fanning themselves with printed programs, children squirming until the choir began. Karen sang before she ever understood stage fright. Her voice wasn't loud, it was steady, warm. It had texture, the kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. After church came dinner. Long tables crowded with cousins, stories layered over each other, someone always debating politics, someone always teasing someone else. It wasn't chaos. It was structure wrapped in noise. Karen loved it. She loved how nobody ate alone. She loved how disagreements ended in hugs. She loved how the elders remembered everything. Who dated who in 1998, who couldn't cook rice properly, who thought they were slick. Community wasn't optional, it was assumed. By her late 20s, Karen wasn't just a participant in that world. She was building within it. She worked as a project manager for a neighborhood development organization. She helped secure funding for youth programs. She organized art workshops and mentorship nights. She believed in safe spaces because she once needed one. On Friday evenings, she volunteered at her aunt's jazz club, a restored brick building that glowed gold under hanging bulbs. Inside, saxophones cried softly. Pianos held conversations with upright bass lines. The crowd wasn't flashy. It was loyal. Karen sometimes sang there, not for attention, for joy. Meanwhile, nearly 800 miles east, Elishan's life ran on precision. Manhattan didn't slow down for anyone. His mornings started before sunrise, emails before coffee, market updates before conversation. His company occupied the top floors of a glass tower overlooking Midtown. His name sat etched in brushed steel near the entrance, Hartley Innovations. He inherited leadership younger than most expected. His father built the company. Elishan expanded it. He understood numbers the way Karen understood harmony. Clean, predictable, efficient. Board meetings moved quickly. Investors demanded clarity. He delivered it. There was no yelling in his world, just firm statements and measured pauses. He lived in a high-rise apartment with minimalist furniture, neutral tones, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was stunning. The silence was louder. His social life existed inside business dinners and charity functions. Conversations revolved around market trends, acquisitions, and performance metrics. He wore tailored suits that fit perfectly. He slept alone. When his executive assistant mentioned a charity event in Chicago aligned with one of the company's outreach initiatives, Elishan agreed to attend. It made sense strategically. Community engagement improved public perception. He flew into O'Hare on a crisp autumn afternoon. Chicago felt different immediately. Less vertical, more grounded. The event wasn't in a ballroom. It was inside a jazz venue on the south side. Exposed brick. Dim lighting. Tables close together. The kind of place where conversations overlapped and nobody whispered. Elishan stood near the back at first, adjusting his cufflinks slightly, observing. The music began. A piano introduced the melody. Then a voice joined it. Smooth, controlled, confident without trying. He looked toward the stage. Karen stood beneath a warm spotlight, microphone in hand. Her hair curled softly around her shoulders. Her posture relaxed, but sure. She didn't perform like someone trying to impress. She performed like someone at home. Elishan found himself leaning forward slightly. The room seemed to quiet around her voice. When she finished, applause filled the space naturally. Not forced, not polite. Genuine. She stepped off stage to greet guests between sets. Elishan didn't plan to approach her. He did anyway. "Are you always that calm?" he asked when she reached the bar. "Or did you rehearse making it look effortless?" Karen turned toward him slowly. Her eyes assessed him in one glance. Polished suit, corporate posture, slightly out-of-place confidence. She smiled faintly. "I don't rehearse breathing," she said. "So, no." He blinked once, caught off guard. "That was breathing to you?" "It's how I stay honest." He laughed softly. "I'm Elishan, Karen." They shook hands. Her grip was firm. Not delicate, not hesitant. "What brings you here?" she asked. Corporate obligation, he admitted. What brings you here? I volunteer. He glanced toward the stage. You volunteer like that? She raised an eyebrow. You lead companies like that? Touché. He found himself smiling again. The conversation didn't stall. It moved easily. Music, Chicago neighborhoods, why he thought tech funding should support art spaces. She challenged his assumptions about what investment meant. He asked questions instead of defending himself. That surprised her. Most men in suits like to explain. Elysian liked to understand. They talked long enough for the second set to begin without her. Someone gestured urgently toward the stage. Karen sighed lightly. Duty calls. I'll be here, he said before thinking. She studied him for half a second, measuring something unseen. Don't disappear, she replied. And she walked back toward the microphone. Elysian stayed, not because it was strategic, not because it benefited the company, but because for the first time in a long time, something felt unscripted. When the night ended, he didn't check his phone immediately. He waited near the exit. Karen approached, folding her jacket over one arm. You're still here, she said. You told me not to disappear. A small smile curved across her face. Chicago can be persuasive, she said lightly. So can good company. There it was. The first flicker. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just recognition. Two lives built on entirely different foundations. One shaped by community. One shaped by expectation. Meeting in the middle of a jazz song. And neither of them knew yet that this quiet introduction would become the axis their lives would eventually turn on. The night at the jazz club didn't end with a grand gesture. It ended with a question. Are you in town long? Karen asked, as they stepped outside into the cool Chicago air. Just the weekend, Elysian replied. Conference tomorrow. Flight back Sunday. Karen nodded. So this is a short-term appearance. That depends, he said lightly, on whether Chicago gives me a reason to extend it. She crossed her arms playfully. Careful. We charge extra for extensions. He laughed, not the polite business laugh he used at corporate dinners, but something looser. They exchanged numbers without ceremony. No dramatic pause. No awkward hesitation, just mutual curiosity. The next morning, Karen received a text. Elysian, do all Chicago mornings smell like coffee and determination? Or is that just my hotel lobby? She stared at the screen, smiling. Karen, that's just downtown pretending to be important. He responded immediately. Elysian, I'm offended on behalf of important people. Karen, you'll survive. The conversation flowed through the day. Light, playful, smart. He asked about her work. She asked what it was like leading a company where everyone expected certainty from him. You ever get tired of being right? She asked during one call that afternoon. Constantly, he admitted. But I get paid to pretend I'm not. That honesty surprised her. By Sunday evening, instead of flying home, Elysian changed his ticket to a later flight. Chicago extended my stay, he told her when they met for dinner. Did we charge you? She teased. I consider it an investment. 2 weeks later, he flew back. Not for work. For her. Karen didn't announce him to her family immediately. She observed him first, watched how he carried himself outside of structured environments. When she finally invited him to a Sunday cookout at her cousin's house, she gave him one warning. They will ask questions. I expect nothing less, he replied. The backyard was alive when they arrived, music playing from a speaker, smoke rising from the grill, children running through sprinklers, folding chairs arranged in loose circles. Elysian stepped in carefully at first, then relaxed as Karen introduced him. This is Elysian. No titles, no mention of CEO, just his name. An uncle handed him a paper plate without asking if he wanted one. Someone else asked where he was from. Another voice joked, he better know how to handle seasoning. Elysian smiled through it. I'm here to learn, he said. That answer earned approving nods. At one point, Karen stepped away to help in the kitchen. When she returned, she found Elysian crouched down, helping a little boy fix a loose wheel on a toy truck. He wasn't performing. He was participating. Later, he stood beside the grill, listening to a debate about city politics. He didn't dominate the conversation. He asked thoughtful questions. Karen watched him carefully. He wasn't shrinking. He wasn't posturing. He was adjusting. When she nudged him lightly, whispering, "You okay?" He leaned closer. "I've negotiated billion-dollar contracts," he murmured. "This feels more intense." She laughed quietly. "Welcome to Sunday." By the end of the evening, someone slapped him on the back and said, "You're all right." And in Karen's world, that meant something. A month later, it was her turn. Elysian invited her to New York for a long weekend. When she entered his corporate headquarters, the contrast was immediate. Glass walls, quiet hallways, security badges, clean lines everywhere. Employees nodded respectfully as Elysian walked past. Karen noticed how his posture shifted subtly. More composed, more controlled. He introduced her simply. "This is Karen." Again, no embellishment. During a tour of the robotics lab, she asked direct questions about funding priorities. "How much of this goes back into community initiatives?" she asked, scanning a machine prototype. A senior executive hesitated slightly. Elysian answered instead, "Not enough yet." She looked at him sideways. Honest answer. He met her gaze. "You prefer dishonest ones?" "Never." Later, in a sleek conference room overlooking the city, Karen adjusted his tie before a meeting. "You look like you're about to announce world domination," she teased. "I'm announcing quarterly growth," he replied. Same energy. He caught her hand briefly before stepping inside. For the first time, the corporate world felt less suffocating to him. Because she was in it. Their relationship developed through small, steady moments. Late-night video calls where she'd fall asleep mid-conversation and he'd stay on the line quietly. Cooking together in her apartment, arguing about whether garlic should be measured or felt. "You can't just guess seasoning," he protested once. "I don't guess," she replied confidently. "I know." He tasted the sauce, paused, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. You know." She grinned triumphantly. He learned her coffee order. She learned how he preferred silence before big meetings. They weren't dramatic, they were deliberate. And that made it feel real. One evening on his balcony in Manhattan, city lights flickering below them, Karen leaned against the railing. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's dream?" she asked suddenly. Elysian didn't answer immediately. "Yes," he admitted after a moment. "My father built this company. I expanded it. But sometimes I wonder if I chose it, or inherited it." Karen studied him carefully. "That's the first time you've said something unsure." "I'm not unsure," he corrected lightly. "Just aware." She reached for his hand. "You don't always have to be the strongest person in the room." He looked at her. "In my world, I do." She squeezed his fingers gently. "Then step into mine sometimes." And he did. Let me pause here for a second. Have you ever dated someone from a completely different background? Different culture, different expectations, different way of seeing the world? Did it stretch you or scare you? Drop your experience in the comments, because relationships like this don't just test love, they test identity. And if you're enjoying how this story is unfolding, make sure you're subscribed. We tell stories that dig deeper than surface-level romance. Now, let's continue. By winter, flights between Chicago and New York became routine. They weren't labeling it loudly. They didn't need to. Karen noticed she started imagining him at family holidays. Elysian noticed he checked his phone first thing in the morning, hoping she'd texted. One night, as snow fell outside her apartment window, he lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. "This feels steady," he said quietly. She turned her head. "Is that a compliment?" "It's rare," he clarified. She rested her head against his chest. "Steady is good." He wrapped his arm around her carefully. For a man used to volatility in markets and boardrooms, steadiness felt like peace. For a woman raised inside constant community, steadiness felt like home. Neither of them rushed the words. But they both felt it forming. Something beyond attraction. Something beyond curiosity. Something that didn't feel temporary. And neither of them saw the fault line forming beneath it. Not yet. Winter softened into spring. Chicago thawed slowly, stubborn patches of snow clinging to sidewalks long after the sun insisted otherwise. Karen liked that about the city. It didn't rush transformation. It allowed change to happen in stages. Her relationship with Elysian had moved the same way. Not dramatic, not rushed, layer by layer. By their first anniversary, The distance between Chicago and Manhattan no longer felt inconvenient. It felt intentional. They chose each other across state lines. That mattered. They decided to celebrate quietly. Chinese takeout, no reservations, no spotlight. Karen picked up wonton soup and orange chicken from a small place she'd loved since college. Elysian arrived that evening with wine and a bouquet he admitted he had Googled to make sure it was appropriate. "You researched flowers?" she asked, amused. "I research everything," he replied calmly. "It's efficient." She shook her head. "You are unbelievable." They ate cross-legged on the living room floor. No table, no formality, just containers spread between them and chopsticks that Elysian still struggled to handle properly. "Stop gripping it like a boardroom pen," Karen laughed, adjusting his fingers. "Relax." He glanced at her. "I don't relax. You're doing it right now." He paused. She wasn't wrong. That night felt easy. They argued over which movie to stream and ended up not watching anything at all. They talked instead, about childhood stories they hadn't shared before. Karen told him about sneaking into her aunt's jazz club when she was 15 just to stand behind the stage and feel the bass vibrate through the floorboards. Elysian told her about being 14 and sitting at the head of his father's long dining table, while investors discussed numbers he barely understood but was expected to absorb. "Did you ever get to just be a kid?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Not really." She studied him in the quiet light of the apartment. "You deserved that," she said softly. No one had ever told him that before. He reached for her hand. "Maybe I'm catching up now." Later that evening, they stepped onto her small balcony. The city hummed beneath them. Distant traffic, a passing train, faint laughter from somewhere down the block. Karen leaned against the railing, arms folded loosely. "I want to build something bigger one day," she said. "You already are," he replied automatically. She shook her head. "No, I mean something permanent. A community center, music rooms, art classes, mentorship programs, somewhere kids can go when home feels heavy." He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct. He listened. "Growing up," she continued, "I had church and family. Not everyone does. Some kids need space to breathe." Elysian looked at her profile against the skyline. "I could help fund that," he said instinctively. She turned toward him quickly. "That's not what I meant." "I know," he clarified. "I'm not trying to fix it. I just believe in it." She searched his face, making sure his support wasn't transactional. It wasn't. He stepped closer. "In my world, success is measured in numbers," he said quietly. "Revenue, growth, expansion. But sometimes I wonder if any of it changes someone's life directly." She reached for his jacket collar, smoothing it absently. "It does," she said. "Just not in ways you can always see." He exhaled slowly. "I don't always know who I am outside of being CEO. Then figure it out," she replied simply. "With you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she rested her forehead lightly against his chest. "You're my person," she whispered. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't rehearsed. They were steady, and for the first time in years, Elysian felt something shift inside him. Not ambition, not pressure, belonging. He held her closer. "I don't want to lose this," he admitted. "You won't," she said confidently. Neither of them knew how fragile that confidence would become. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. No storm outside, no warning signs. Karen stood in her bathroom holding a small plastic stick. 2 lines, clear, undeniable. Her heart pounded loudly enough that she felt it in her ears. She sat down on the edge of the bathtub slowly. 1,000 thoughts rushed at once. Logistics, timing, family reactions, Elysian's schedule, his career. But beneath all of it, there was something else. Joy. Unexpected. Deep. She placed a hand over her stomach instinctively. "We're okay," she whispered, even though it was only a few weeks along. That evening, she didn't plan a big reveal. No candles. No dramatic setup. She simply waited until Elysian finished reviewing something on his laptop. "I need to tell you something," she said, standing in front of him. He looked up immediately, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She hesitated for half a second. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed lasted just long enough for fear to creep in. His eyes widened. For one breath, she couldn't read him. Then, he stood so quickly the laptop nearly slid off the couch. "You're serious?" She nodded. He stared at her, stunned. Then he laughed, not nervous laughter, a genuine disbelieving sound. "We're going to be parents?" he asked, stepping toward her. She nodded again, tears gathering in her eyes. He lifted her slightly off the ground, spinning her once before setting her down carefully. "We're going to be parents," he repeated, softer this time. They sat together on the couch, hands intertwined. He started talking immediately. Names, timelines, rearranging travel schedules, finding a pediatrician in Chicago. She watched him carefully. He wasn't pulling away. He wasn't shutting down. He was planning. That reassured her. They stayed up late that night discussing everything from nursery colors to whether the baby would inherit her singing voice or his stubbornness. "Stubborn?" he protested. "You negotiate with baristas," she said flatly. "That's efficiency." She laughed. They fell asleep with his hand resting over her stomach. The next morning felt different. Not bad, just heavier. Elijah stood at the kitchen counter, staring at his phone longer than usual. "What's wrong?" Karen asked gently. "Board meeting moved up," he replied. "There's an acquisition issue overseas." She walked over to him. "Okay." He nodded slowly. "It's just timing." The word hung between them. "Timing?" she repeated. "I mean, I want this. I do." He ran a hand through his hair. "I just need to adjust things." She studied him carefully. "Adjust what?" "Everything." It wasn't rejection. It wasn't doubt, but it wasn't pure confidence either. She stepped closer. "We'll figure it out," she said firmly. He nodded again, but his eyes flickered with calculation. Travel schedules, board expectations, investor reactions. He kissed her forehead before heading out. "I'll call you tonight," he promised. As the door closed behind him, Karen stood still for a moment. The joy from the night before remained, but something else had joined it. Awareness. Love was steady, but responsibility was real. And even the strongest connections can feel pressure when the future shifts suddenly. That evening, as she lay in bed waiting for his call, she placed a hand over her stomach again. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. She believed it. And for now, so did he. The first month after the pregnancy announcement felt manageable. Elijah kept his promise. He called every night. He adjusted 2 business trips. He researched pediatric specialists in Chicago during early weeks. On the surface, nothing had shifted. But pressure rarely announces itself loudly at first. It gathers. In Manhattan, Hartley Innovations was preparing for its largest international acquisition to date. A European competitor had made an unexpected move in the market. Investors reacted sharply. Stock analysts speculated publicly about leadership stability. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. Elijah entered the conference room with a printed agenda already memorized. "We need immediate expansion," one board member said flatly. "No delays, no distractions." The word distracted landed harder than intended. Elijah kept his face composed. "We're executing the plan," he replied evenly. "Good," another voice added. "Because instability at the top is the last thing we need right now." He understood the message without it being stated directly. No instability, no unpredictability, no life changes that could shift focus. The meeting stretched longer than expected. By the time he returned to his office, his phone displayed 3 unread emails from Karen. Subject lines: first prenatal appointment confirmed. Ultrasound schedule. Vitamins doctor recommended. He opened the first email. Karen had written warmly, describing how she felt during the initial consultation. She included a photo of paperwork resting on her lap and a small caption, "First step officially taken." He smiled faintly. Then another notification appeared. "Investor call in 15 minutes." He marked the email unread and placed the phone face down. "I'll reply tonight," he told himself. In Chicago, Karen sat in the waiting room alone. She wasn't upset. Not yet. She understood his schedule. She had always respected it. But when the nurse called her name and she walked into the exam room without him, she felt the absence more sharply than expected. The ultrasound screen flickered to life. A small heartbeat pulsed visibly. "There," the technician said gently. That's your baby. Karen swallowed. It's fast, she murmured. Healthy, the technician reassured her. Karen reached for her phone instinctively to record the moment. She hesitated. He was in a meeting. She placed the phone back in her purse. Later that evening she called him. He answered on the third ring. Hey, he said quickly. Can I call you back in 20? Her smile faded slightly. It's okay, she replied. Just wanted to tell you, the heartbeat is strong. There was a pause on his end. That's great, he said sincerely. That's really good. You missed it, she added gently. I know, I'm sorry. It's just busy, she finished. Yes, she didn't argue. She didn't accuse. But something small shifted inside her. Over the next few weeks, the pattern repeated. He sent money for prenatal supplements without being asked. He transferred funds to upgrade her apartment's security system just in case. He arranged for a high-rated obstetrician consultation through a private referral network. On paper, he was being responsible. In person, he was less present. During video calls, he checked emails mid-conversation. During visits, he took calls on the balcony. One evening in Chicago, Karen confronted him gently. Are you here? She asked quietly while he typed something on his laptop at her kitchen table. I'm right here, he replied without looking up. She closed the laptop. He blinked up at her. I mean, mentally, she clarified. He exhaled slowly. There's a lot happening right now. There's a lot happening here too, she said, placing his hand over her stomach. He softened briefly. I know. But knowing and adjusting were different things. Family conversations added new layers. Karen's family was excited. They asked about wedding plans casually. So, when's the ceremony? Someone joked one Sunday. Karen laughed it off, but she felt the weight of expectation. In Manhattan, Elysian had dinner with his father. The older man listened quietly as Elysian explained the pregnancy. And you're prepared for that? His father asked evenly. Yes. In the middle of expansion? Yes. His father folded his napkin neatly. Timing is rarely ideal. Just don't let personal decisions compromise strategic ones. Elysian understood the subtext. Family was acceptable. Failure was not. Driving home that night, he felt squeezed between two worlds. In Chicago, love meant integration, family, commitment, visibility. In Manhattan, leadership meant composure, control, priority, dominance. He began calculating how to hold both, and calculation slowly replaced ease. Karen noticed the drift first in his tone. Calls shortened, visits rescheduled. When he did come to Chicago, he seemed restless. You're different, she said one night while they lay in bed. I'm tired, he replied. That's not the same thing. He stared at the ceiling. What do you want me to say? The truth. He hesitated. I'm trying to balance everything. Are we part of everything? She asked quietly. Or in addition to it? He turned toward her, frustration flickering briefly. Why are you making this a competition? I'm not, she replied calmly. I'm asking where we fit. He didn't answer immediately, and that silence carried more weight than any argument. The emotional drift didn't explode. It widened gradually. Small missed moments, small delays, small justifications. Karen began attending prenatal classes alone. She told herself it was temporary. Elysian began sleeping less. He told himself it was necessary. Neither of them admitted what was forming between them. Distance, not dramatic, not loud, but real. And pressure, quiet, steady pressure, changes people in ways they don't recognize until something breaks. The confrontation didn't happen in a hospital. It didn't happen in a kitchen. It happened where their love first felt certain, by the river. Spring had deepened into early summer. The trees near the water were fully green now, branches bending slightly in the evening breeze. This was where they had once sat laughing about nothing, where Karen first told him he could step into her world. That evening, Karen arrived first. She stood beneath the old oak tree near the walkway, one hand resting over her stomach. She was 5 months pregnant now. The curve was visible beneath her dress. Not dramatic, but undeniable. She watched the water move. He was late, not by much, but long enough for thoughts to grow louder. When Elysian approached, He looked different, not physically, but in posture. His shoulders were tighter, his expression guarded. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey." He didn't step in for a hug immediately. She noticed. "You wanted to talk," he said. She studied him for a second before answering. "I wanted to understand." "Understand what?" She exhaled slowly. "Where we are." He glanced toward the river, avoiding her eyes. "We're here," he replied vaguely. "That's not what I mean." Silence. The wind shifted slightly, rustling leaves above them. "I feel you pulling away," she continued. "And I don't know if it's work or if it's us." He rubbed his jaw. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" He didn't respond immediately. She took a step closer. "Talk to me." He finally looked at her. "I didn't expect this," he admitted. "The baby?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "You were happy." "I was." "Past tense?" she pressed. He inhaled sharply. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," she said, voice rising slightly, "is me sitting in doctors' offices alone while you tell me everything is fine." He clenched his jaw. "I'm under pressure you don't understand." "Then explain it." "It's not something I can just explain in a conversation by the river." She laughed once, short, frustrated. "This is exactly what I mean." He looked away again. "The board is watching everything I do," he said finally. "The company is expanding. Investors are nervous. If I misstep right now, I risk everything." "And what am I?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. The pause was sharp. "You're important," he said after a moment. "That's not what I asked." The breeze picked up again. "I don't see how I can balance this," he said finally, voice lower now. "Not right now." Her chest tightened. "Balance what?" "A child. A family. This level of responsibility." "You already have responsibility," she replied. "To us." His voice shifted, defensive now. "This is bigger than just us." "Bigger than your son?" she asked. He flinched at that. "You're twisting my words." "No, I'm trying to understand them." He took a step back. "I need focus, total focus. And I can't do that if my life is split." "So we're a distraction?" she asked. He closed his eyes briefly. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then say what you are saying." He opened his eyes again. And this time, there was no evasion. "We can't do this." The words landed without volume, but they hit harder than shouting. Karen blinked. "What?" "We rushed this," he continued. "We didn't think through how it would impact everything." She stared at him. "We've been together over a year, and now everything is different." "Yes," she said, "because we're building something." He shook his head slowly. "I'm not ready for this." "For what?" "For being someone's father right now." The river moved steadily behind them. Cars passed in the distance. Life continued as if nothing had shifted. "You said you wanted this," she whispered. "I thought I did." The sentence cut deeper than anything else he'd said. "You thought?" she repeated. "I can't risk losing control," he added, frustration rising. "If the company collapses because I'm distracted." She stepped back, eyes widening. "You think loving your child will collapse your company? You don't understand how fragile this is. And you don't understand what you're throwing away," she replied. Silence again. Longer this time. He looked at her stomach, then back at her face, and something inside him hardened, not cruelty, but fear disguised as logic. "I need to step back," he said. Her voice trembled now. "Step back from what?" "From this? From me?" He didn't respond immediately. Finally, "Yes." The word barely left his lips. But it was enough. She felt it physically, like the ground shifted beneath her feet. "You're leaving," she said, not as a question. He swallowed. "I can't do this right now." Tears gathered in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall immediately. "You're walking away from your child," she said. "I'll provide," he replied quickly. "Financially. Whatever's needed." She laughed through the tears that finally escaped. "Is that what you think this is about?" He stepped back another inch. "I'm trying to be realistic." "You're being afraid." He didn't deny it, and that hurt even more. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The oak tree above them held steady. The same tree beneath which she once said, "You're my person." He looked at her one last time. "I'm sorry," he said, not loudly, not dramatically, just final. Then he turned and walked away. She didn't chase him, didn't call after him. She simply stood there, one hand over her stomach, watching the man she loved disappear down the walkway. The distance between them grew with each step, and for the first time since that jazz club night, she felt completely alone. Pause for a second. Was he honest or selfish? Drop your answer in the comments, because sometimes people say they're being realistic when they're really running. And if you feel for Karen right now, if that moment hit you, hit the like button. Let's continue. The walk home felt longer than it ever had before. Karen didn't remember crossing certain streets. She didn't remember passing storefronts. The world around her blurred into background noise, while one sentence replayed clearly. "We can't do this." By the time she reached her apartment, the sky had turned dark. Inside, everything looked the same. The throw blanket still folded neatly over the couch, the half-read book on the coffee table, the ultrasound printout taped to the refrigerator. Nothing in the room reflected what had just happened. She placed her purse down slowly. For a moment, she just stood there, waiting, as if maybe he would call and say he didn't mean it. Her phone remained silent. She sank onto the couch and let the tears come fully now. Not dramatic sobbing, not collapse, just steady, quiet grief. One hand rested over her stomach. "I'm still here," she whispered to the life growing inside her. That sentence grounded her. He left, but she didn't. The first few days were the hardest, not because of arguments, because of absence. No good morning text. No, "How are you feeling today?" No check-in before bed. Silence filled spaces that used to be routine. Karen kept going to work. She showed up at meetings. She reviewed budgets. She coordinated youth programs. But when colleagues asked how she was doing, she gave short answers. Good, fine, busy. The truth felt too heavy to unpack casually. At night, the apartment felt larger. The bed, colder. She turned onto her side and tried not to imagine him sleeping comfortably in Manhattan. As summer faded, Chicago shifted quickly. The air sharpened. The wind gained edge. Leaves fell early that year, scraping against sidewalks in restless patterns. Karen felt the change physically. Her pregnancy progressed. Her body adjusted. Her belly grew. But, emotionally, she entered a colder season. The warmth of early love felt distant. Not erased, just unreachable. On certain mornings, frost coated the edges of parked cars. She would scrape her windshield slowly, breath visible in the air, feeling like she was clearing more than just ice. She didn't talk about him much, not even to herself. But memory lingered in small ways. A mug he once used still in her cabinet. A jacket he forgot one weekend hanging near the door. One evening she folded that jacket carefully and placed it in a storage box. Not angrily, just decisively. In Manhattan, Elysian worked later than usual. He expanded meetings, accepted additional investor dinners, reviewed projections repeatedly even after they were finalized. He told himself productivity would quiet the noise in his head. It didn't. His apartment felt different now, too. The view remained impressive. The city still moved below. But when he returned home at night, there was no voice asking how the meeting went. No kitchen light left on, no gentle challenge to his assumptions. He told himself it was cleaner this way. Focused, efficient. He avoided Chicago, avoided checking Karen's social media, avoided thinking about the timeline of her pregnancy. But certain details surfaced anyway. He knew she would be around 6 months now. He knew the baby would be moving more. He knew there were milestones he wasn't part of. And each time that thought appeared, he buried it under numbers. Karen attended prenatal classes alone. She sat among couples practicing breathing techniques and hand squeezes. When the instructor said, "Partners, place your hand here," she hesitated before placing her own hand over her stomach. The room didn't stare, but she felt the difference. During one class, she stepped outside for air. The cold hit her face sharply. She exhaled slowly, watching her breath disappear. "I can do this," she murmured. Not to prove anything, just to remind herself. Her family sensed something had changed. "You all right?" someone asked gently during Sunday dinner. She nodded. "He's busy," she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth either. Weeks turned into a pattern. Karen stopped expecting messages. Elysian stopped drafting them. The space between them hardened. Neither reached out first. Pride? Maybe. Fear? Definitely. Karen focused on small joys. Painting a soft yellow crib, organizing tiny clothes by size, writing letters in a baby journal she kept tucked in her nightstand. "Today I felt you kick stronger than before," she wrote one evening. "We're building something beautiful, even if it's just us." Meanwhile, Elysian stood in a boardroom one afternoon while applause filled the space. A major contract finalized successfully. The company's stock rose. Investors congratulated him. "You made the right call," someone said approvingly. He smiled politely. But the victory felt hollow, because there was no one he wanted to call first. He thought about dialing her number. He didn't. Silence, when stretched long enough, becomes its own decision. Not loud, not explosive, but final in its own way. By the time winter fully settled over Chicago, Karen had stopped looking toward the door, and Elysian had convinced himself that distance was the responsible choice. Neither realized that silence doesn't remove consequences. It only postpones them. Karen stopped waiting for messages. That decision didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened gradually. After enough evenings passed without a notification, after enough mornings began without a good morning text, her prenatal appointments continued. This time, she didn't look at the empty chair beside her. She walked into the exam room alone with steadier steps. At one appointment, the doctor measured the baby's growth carefully. "Strong heartbeat," the doctor said. "Everything progressing well." Karen smiled. "Of course he is," she replied quietly. She recorded short voice notes afterward, not to send to anyone, but to keep for herself. "Today we heard you kick harder," she whispered into her phone while sitting in her car. "You're stubborn already." She started writing more consistently in her baby journal. Not sad entries, not bitter ones, practical ones. Lists of things she wanted to teach him. How to speak up for himself. How to respect women. How to stay grounded, even when success tempts ego. She wrote his name at the top of a fresh page. Orion. She didn't consult Elysian. She chose it because it felt strong. Steady. Bright. On weekends, she rearranged her apartment slowly. She painted the crib, a soft lemon tone she once told Elysian she liked. She didn't change the color just because he wasn't there. She kept it. On her balcony, she planted new flowers in small containers. Sunflowers. She liked how they turned toward light naturally. She watered them carefully every morning. Growth requires consistency, she reminded herself. Community stepped in without being asked. Neighbors offered advice about newborn routines. Church members dropped off meals. At Sunday service, hands rested gently on her shoulders during prayer. "You're not alone," someone whispered once. And she believed it. The apartment felt different now. Not empty. Focused. Each kick from Orion reminded her that her world was still expanding, just in a different direction than she originally imagined. At night, instead of replaying the river conversation, she read parenting articles. She watched videos about swaddling techniques. She practiced assembling the stroller alone until she could do it without instructions. Confidence didn't return loudly. It built quietly. And somewhere between a prenatal class and a grocery store trip, where a stranger smiled at her growing belly, Karen realized something important. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was preparing. Hartley Innovations hit record numbers that quarter. Financial headlines praised strategic leadership. Analysts described Elysian as disciplined, decisive, forward-thinking. He accepted the compliments with the same controlled nod he always used. In public, nothing appeared unstable. Privately, the quiet grew heavier. His calendar was full. Investor breakfasts, media interviews, late strategy sessions. But when he returned to his apartment each night, the silence greeted him first. He no longer left the kitchen light on. There was no reason to. One evening, after a particularly successful contract announcement, he stood alone near the window overlooking Midtown. The city stretched endlessly below. Traffic lights blinked in patterns. Somewhere across those miles was Chicago. He pulled his phone from his pocket without fully thinking. Scrolled. Paused. He hadn't opened Karen's profile in weeks. He told himself it was discipline. He opened it anyway. A photo appeared. Karen standing in her living room, hand resting over her stomach, sunflowers visible behind her on the balcony. She looked calm. Strong. There was no caption referencing him. No indirect message. Just a quiet update. He stared longer than he intended. Then he closed the app quickly. Later that night, he opened an old folder in his photo gallery. The jazz club. Her laughing at a cookout. A blurry picture of them on her balcony. He studied his own expression in those photos. Relaxed. Unforced. He hadn't looked like that in months. He sat down on the edge of his bed, phone resting in his hand. For the first time since the river, he let himself feel it fully. Not anger. Not justification. Loss. He replayed the moment he said, "We can't do this." He remembered the look in her eyes. Not shock, but disbelief. He convinced himself at the time that stepping away was responsible. Protect the company. Protect stability. But stability for who? The numbers were rising. The market was steady. Investors were satisfied. Yet he felt like something essential had been traded quietly. He scrolled back to the most recent ultrasound image she had emailed months ago. He never deleted it. He enlarged the photo. A small profile. Barely defined features. His son, Orion. The name echoed in his mind. He hadn't asked what she planned to name him. He hadn't called to ask. The realization sat heavy. He placed the phone face down on the nightstand and leaned back slowly. Success felt measurable. Parenthood felt uncertain. He chose measurable. But measurable didn't feel meaningful anymore. And that awareness began to unsettle him more than any boardroom negotiation ever had. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever chosen success over someone you loved? Not because you didn't care, but because you were afraid of losing control? Drop your thoughts below. Real answers only. And if this story feels real to you, make sure you're subscribed. We don't shy away from the complicated parts of life here. Now let's continue. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Karen wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was organizing. The nursery was nearly finished. The crib stood assembled near the window. Folded blankets lined the dresser. A small lamp glowed warmly in the corner. Her phone rested on the nightstand while she sorted through contacts. Names scrolled past. Colleagues. Family. Old classmates. Her thumb paused. A lesion. She stared at the name longer than she expected. Not because she wanted to call him, because the name carried weight. It represented what could have been. The jazz club night. The balcony promises. The river goodbye. Her breathing remained steady. She tapped the contact. Options appeared. Call. Message. Edit. Delete. Her thumb hovered. For months, she kept his number out of habit. Out of hope she didn't want to admit still existed. But hope without action becomes self-inflicted. She exhaled slowly. Then press delete. A small confirmation box appeared. Delete contact? She didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The name disappeared. The space in her phone looked clean. For a moment she felt a pang. Not regret, but acknowledgement. She had loved him. That didn't vanish. But attachment to someone who chose distance was different from love. She placed the phone down and walked toward the crib. Orion kicked gently. She smiled. "Looks like it's just us," she murmured softly. But the words didn't feel lonely. They felt strong. That evening she stood on the balcony beside the sunflowers she planted months ago. They had grown tall now, faces turned toward the fading light. She ran her fingers along one petal carefully. Growth doesn't ask permission. It happens whether someone stays or leaves. Her life was still expanding, just not in the direction she once imagined. Later, she sat at the small desk by her bedroom window and opened her baby journal. She wrote, "Today I let something go, not because it didn't matter, but because we deserve peace." She paused, then added, "You will grow up knowing love isn't about control. It's about showing up." She closed the journal and placed it beside the crib. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no grand speech, just quiet certainty. Single motherhood no longer felt like a consequence. It felt like a commitment. She wasn't abandoned. She was adapting. When she turned off the lights that night, she didn't check her phone. She didn't wonder if he would call. She didn't replay the river conversation. She slept. And for the first time since he walked away, her rest felt undisturbed, not because the pain was erased, but because she chose clarity, and clarity is stronger than longing. Orion arrived before anyone expected. 5 weeks early. The labor began in the middle of the night, sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. Karen drove herself to Mercy Hospital with controlled breathing and steady focus. She didn't call anyone immediately. She trusted her body first. By dawn, Orion was born. Small, fierce, fighting. The doctors moved quickly, but calmly. They explained prematurity risks. They reassured her while transferring him to neonatal care for observation. Karen held him only briefly before nurses guided him toward the NICU. "I'm right here," she whispered, even as they wheeled him away. Hours later, she sat in a hospital chair, exhausted but alert. Her phone lay silent beside her. She hadn't reached out to Elysian. She didn't plan to. That chapter, she believed, was closed. Then her phone lit up. Unknown number. Chicago area code. She stared at it. Hospitals rarely call from unknown extensions. She answered. "Hello? Is this Karen Mitchell?" A professional voice asked. "Yes, this is Mercy Hospital calling, regarding your newborn." Her pulse quickened. "I'm already here," she replied, confused. There was a brief pause. "Yes, ma'am, we're aware. But there's a consent issue." "Consent issue?" she repeated. "The baby's birth documentation lists the father as Elysian Hartley." Her chest tightened. She hadn't updated the form. She had left it blank initially, but during admission intake, staff asked again. She had spoken the truth. He was the father, even if he wasn't present. "There's a procedure recommended," the nurse continued, "due to a minor heart murmur detected this morning." Karen stood slowly. "I was told he was stable." "He is stable. But the pediatric cardiologist recommends a precautionary correction, and we require authorization from both legal parents listed." Silence pressed against her ear. "He's not here," she said evenly. "We'll need him contacted immediately." The sentence felt clinical, transactional. She swallowed. "I don't have his number anymore." Another pause. "We have his information on file. We can attempt to reach him." Karen closed her eyes briefly. This was the one scenario she never prepared for. Her independence didn't erase biology or paperwork. "I'll come down," she said quietly. She left her recovery room carefully, moving slower than usual. The hospital corridors felt longer than before. When she reached the NICU waiting area, a nurse approached. "We've initiated contact with Mr. Hartley," she explained. "We informed him it's time-sensitive." Karen didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked toward the window overlooking the neonatal unit. Orion lay inside an incubator, small chest rising carefully. Machines assisting but not alarming. Her hand rested against the glass. She wasn't angry. She wasn't pleading. She was focused. If Elysian came, it would not be for her. It would be for his son. And for the first time since deleting his number, Karen realized something painful. You can let someone go emotionally, but you can't erase them biologically. She inhaled slowly, then waited. The waiting room clock moved slower than usual. Karen sat upright, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed ahead. She didn't pace. She didn't cry. She conserved her energy. Footsteps approached from the corridor. She didn't turn immediately, but she felt it before she saw him. Elysian stopped a few feet away. He looked different. Travel-worn, sleeves slightly creased, eyes unsettled. For a moment, neither spoke. He had taken the first available flight. He hadn't stopped thinking since the voicemail. "Karen," he said finally. His voice was lower than she remembered. She stood slowly. Elysian, no hostility, no warmth, just acknowledgement. He glanced toward the NICU doors. "Where is he?" She studied his face carefully. "He's inside." He stepped closer to the glass window overlooking the neonatal unit. Karen followed. Orion lay beneath soft lighting, oxygen support in place, chest rising steadily. Elysian froze. That was the moment it became real. Not theoretical, not an idea. His son, so small, so unmistakably his. His jaw tightened slightly. "He's early," he murmured. 5 weeks, she replied. He nodded slowly. A nurse approached. "Mr. Hartley?" "Yes. We'll need you to review consent documentation for the cardiology procedure." He swallowed. "Procedure." Karen watched him carefully. The nurse explained briefly. A minor surgical correction to address a small murmur. Preventative, controlled, necessary. Elysian listened without interrupting. "Is he in danger?" he asked. "He's stable," the nurse replied. "But we don't delay in cases like this." Karen stepped slightly to the side, allowing space. This wasn't about their history. It was about Orion. Elysian's eyes returned to the incubator. He placed his palm gently against the glass. Orion moved faintly. That small motion shattered whatever distance he had constructed. "He looks like you," Elysian said quietly. Karen didn't answer. She was watching him, not with longing, not with resentment. With evaluation, he turned toward her. "I didn't know," he said. "I know," she replied evenly. "I should have been here." "Yes," she said simply. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just truth. He looked back at Orion. The nurse handed him the clipboard. "We'll need your signature before the surgical team prepares." The pen felt heavier than expected in his hand. Karen stepped closer now, not for comfort, for clarity. "This isn't about us," she said softly. "This is about him." He nodded. And for the first time since the river, his certainty wasn't about business. It was about responsibility. He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the tiny life inside the incubator. Shock had passed. Now something else settled in. Connection. Unavoidable. The clipboard rested between them. Consent for neonatal cardiac intervention. Medical language filled the page. Percentages, risks, outcomes. Elysian scanned each line carefully, not because he doubted the doctors, but because control had always meant understanding the details. Karen stood beside him, arms folded gently across her chest. Not defensive. Protective. "He'll be under anesthesia for a short time," the nurse explained calmly. "The procedure itself is brief. Recovery is typically smooth in cases like this." Elysian nodded. "Complication rate?" he asked automatically. "Low," the nurse replied. "Especially when addressed early." He exhaled. Early. He looked toward Orion again. 7 months ago, he convinced himself stepping away was strategic. Now strategy felt small. Karen broke the silence. "You don't have to overthink this," she said quietly. He glanced at her. "I'm not overthinking," he replied. She held his gaze. "You are." The pen hovered above the paper. His voice shifted. Less controlled, more exposed. "I was afraid," he said suddenly. The words came without rehearsal. Karen didn't interrupt. "I thought if I let myself fully step into this, I'd lose everything I built," he continued. "I didn't know how to carry both." "You didn't try," she replied. He nodded once. "I know." No argument, no excuse, just acknowledgement. He looked back at the form. "And now?" she asked. He swallowed. "Now I know what matters." There was no dramatic speech behind it. Just realization. He signed, Elysian Hartley. The ink settled into the paper quickly. The nurse took the clipboard. "We'll prepare him now." Karen's breathing slowed deliberately. A neonatal specialist entered the room, speaking gently as they adjusted equipment. Elysian stood closer this time, not at the edge of the space. "Can I?" he started. "Yes," the nurse said softly. "You can speak to him." He leaned closer to the incubator. "Hey," he whispered, voice rougher now. "I'm here." Orion's fingers twitched faintly. Karen watched, not with hope, not yet, with attention. This was the moment that separated apology from action. The medical team carefully wheeled Orion toward the surgical area. Karen's body tensed instinctively. Elysian stepped beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. Neither pulled away. The double doors closed slowly behind the small incubator. Silence settled into the waiting space. Not the silence of distance, the silence of uncertainty. Elysian looked at Karen. "I won't leave," he said. She studied him carefully. "Stay for him," she replied. He nodded, and for the first time since the river, they stood side by side, not as lovers, not as adversaries, as parents. The surgery had begun. The waiting room felt colder than before. Not physically. Emotionally. Karen sat upright, hands resting on her knees. The adrenaline from labor had worn off. The exhaustion had settled into her bones, but she refused to lean back. Elysian sat beside her. Close, but not touching. The double doors leading to surgery remained closed. For a while, neither of them spoke. It wasn't avoidance. It was adjustment. Finally, Elysian broke the silence. "I should have been there for every appointment." Karen didn't look at him. Yes. No anger. Just agreement. He swallowed. "I convinced myself that stepping away would protect everyone. That if I stayed focused, I could provide better." She turned to him now. "Provide what?" "Security. We had security," she replied quietly. "What we didn't have was you." The words didn't cut loudly. They landed steadily. He absorbed them. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "That's good," she answered. He glanced at her, surprised. She held his gaze firmly. "Because forgiveness isn't automatic." He nodded slowly. "I know." She leaned back slightly, finally allowing herself to exhale. "When you left," she continued, "you didn't just leave me, you left responsibility." He didn't argue. "You made a decision," she said, "and I adjusted to it." He lowered his eyes. "I see that now. That doesn't erase it." "I know." Silence returned briefly. Then he asked carefully, "Is there anything I can do?" She studied him for a long moment before answering. "Yes." He straightened slightly. "Don't disappear again." The simplicity of it hit him harder than accusation. "If you're here," she continued, "be here. Not halfway. Not when it's convenient. Not when it doesn't threaten your comfort." "I won't," he said quickly. She lifted a hand slightly. "Don't promise." He stopped. "Prove it." The waiting room clock ticked quietly. Redemption, she was telling him without saying it directly, would not be emotional. It would be behavioral. "I deleted your number," she added calmly. His eyes flickered. "I figured." "That wasn't punishment," she clarified. "That was peace." He nodded. "I understand." She softened slightly. Not romantically, but humanly. "This isn't about us right now," she said. "This is about Orion." He looked toward the surgery doors again. "I want to be his father," he said quietly. "Then act like one," she replied. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. For the first time in months, he didn't try to win an argument. He simply sat with the weight of what he had done. Minutes stretched longer than they felt. Karen's shoulders finally dropped a little. The hardest part wasn't saying the truth. It was holding the boundary after saying it. She wasn't closing the door, but she wasn't reopening it blindly either. Elysian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I was afraid of losing control," he said after a while. "But I lost something bigger by trying to keep it." She didn't respond immediately. Then, "Fear doesn't excuse absence." He nodded. "No, it doesn't." They sat side by side, not reconciled, not separated, just present. And sometimes presence is the first real step toward redemption. The surgery doors remained closed, but something else had opened. Not love, not yet. Accountability. The surgery lasted just under an hour, long enough to stretch every second into something measurable. Elysian didn't check his phone once, not for board updates, not for missed calls. He kept it face down beside him. That alone marked a shift. When the surgeon finally entered the waiting room, Karen stood immediately. "All went well," the doctor said. "The correction was successful. He'll remain under observation, but we expect a smooth recovery." Karen closed her eyes briefly in relief. Elysian exhaled in a way that sounded almost like surrender. They were allowed to see Orion again once he was stabilized. He looked small, brave, alive. Elysian stood beside the incubator longer this time. Not overwhelmed, not stunned, just aware. That night, after Karen insisted he go home and rest, he stepped outside the hospital into the cool Chicago air. He didn't head straight to the airport. Instead, he sat in his rental car without starting it. The city moved around him. Buses, late-night traffic, pedestrians bundled against the cold. For the first time in years, he didn't feel urgency to return to Manhattan. He opened his phone. Several messages from his executive assistant waited. Board requesting update on acquisition timeline. Investor meeting confirmed for Monday. Media interview rescheduled. He stared at the notifications. Then he did something simple. He typed a response. Postpone all non-critical meetings. I'll be unavailable for the week. He paused. Then added, family emergency. He hit send. The reply came quickly. Understood. Board will need explanation. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in the driver's seat and looked at the hospital building. Explanation. He'd been explaining his life to the board for years. Explaining projections. Explaining strategies. Explaining why expansion was necessary. He had never explained fatherhood. The next morning, he joined a virtual board session from a quiet hospital conference room. Karen was with Orion in recovery. Elysian spoke calmly. My priorities are shifting, he said clearly. I will remain CEO, but operational leadership needs restructuring. Silence followed on the other end of the call. I'm delegating international oversight, effective immediately. Is this temporary? Someone asked. No, he replied. It's permanent. There was pushback. There were concerns, but this time, he didn't frame the decision as weakness. He framed it as sustainability. Long-term success requires stability, he said, and stability includes personal alignment. The call ended without applause, but also without resignation. He had not walked away from responsibility. He had redefined it. Later that afternoon, he returned to Karen's hospital room. I restructured my schedule, he said simply. She studied him. For how long? For as long as it takes. That's vague, she replied evenly. I shifted authority, he clarified. I won't be traveling internationally for the foreseeable future. She didn't smile. She didn't soften. But she nodded once. That's a start. He hesitated, then continued. There's something else. She waited. You once told me about building a community center. Her expression changed slightly. That wasn't a pitch, she said. I know. He stepped closer. I want to fund it. She stiffened slightly. I don't need saving. I'm not saving you, he replied calmly. I'm investing in something that matters. She held his gaze. This isn't an apology project. No, he said. It's action. Silence lingered between them. Finally, she said, if you do this, it won't have your name on it. He nodded immediately. It shouldn't. That was the difference. Before, everything he touched carried legacy. Now, he was choosing impact without ownership. Let me ask you something. Do you believe actions matter more than apologies? Not promises, not words, but real, measurable change. Drop your thoughts below. And if you believe growth is possible after failure, hit the like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Now let's finish this the right way. Orion's recovery was steady. The monitors that once caused tension now became routine background reassurance. Nurses adjusted small wires with practiced care. Karen learned the rhythm of feeding schedules and medication times quickly. Elysian stayed, not hovering, not performative, present. He slept in the uncomfortable hospital chair without complaint. He brought Karen meals when she forgot to eat. When nurses explained post-surgery care, he listened closely, asking precise questions. He did not check market updates during those conversations. That detail did not go unnoticed. On Orion's third day of recovery, Karen watched as Elysian carefully changed his first diaper under a nurse's guidance. You're gripping him like a contract, she said quietly. He glanced up. That obvious? Yes. He adjusted his hands, slower this time. Orion squirmed slightly. Elysian smiled despite himself. He's strong, he murmured. He gets that from me, Karen replied. For the first time since the river, a trace of shared humor passed between them. It wasn't romantic, it was parental, and it mattered. After discharge, Karen returned home with Orion. Elysian did not assume he was moving back in. He asked, "What do you need?" He said, "Consistency," she replied. He rented a furnished apartment nearby in Chicago, Instead of returning immediately to Manhattan, he set up a small crib there too. He showed up for pediatric follow-ups. He learned how to soothe Orion when he cried at 2 a.m. He didn't ask for praise. He didn't narrate his effort. He just did the work. Karen watched quietly. Trust didn't rebuild overnight. But it began. One evening, weeks later, they sat across from each other at her kitchen table, while Orion slept in a bassinet beside them. "You don't get access to me just because you stayed," she said calmly. "I know. I'm not the same person you left. I don't expect you to be." She studied him carefully. "And I won't shrink my life to fit your comfort again." "You shouldn't," he replied. That response carried weight. He wasn't trying to return to the version of their relationship that existed before the fracture. He was building something new. The community center project began quietly, not as a press release, not as a brand expansion. Karen led it. Elysian funded it anonymously. Construction permits were filed. Local artists were invited to consult on design. Music rooms were planned first. Karen walked through the empty building one afternoon, while Orion slept in his stroller. Elysian walked beside her. "You really meant it," she said softly. "Yes. No branding? No naming rights?" He shook his head. "This is yours." She paused in the center of the unfinished space. "It's ours," she corrected gently. That word landed carefully between them, not as a romantic claim, as a shared responsibility. Months passed. Orion grew stronger. His heart healed fully. He laughed loudly. He kicked wildly during bath time. One afternoon, Karen stood on her balcony again, sunflowers blooming tall beside her. Elysian joined her, holding Orion carefully. The air was warm, peaceful. "You didn't have to come back," she said quietly. "I know. You chose to." "Yes." She looked at him. "Why?" He answered without hesitation. "Because I realized success without presence is hollow." She held his gaze longer this time. "And if the board pushes again?" "They can," he said. "But I know where I stand now." She nodded slowly. "Then, I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for promises," he replied. "Good." He stepped slightly closer, not invading, inviting. She didn't step away. That was the first shift. Not dramatic, but real. Several months later, during a quiet evening after Orion had fallen asleep, Elysian handed Karen a document. "What's this?" she asked. "Read it." She scanned the page. He had restructured ownership shares of Hartley Innovations, a portion transferred into a long-term trust for Orion. Not contingent on reconciliation, not conditional on marriage, irrevocable. She looked up slowly. "You didn't have to do this." "I know. Is this another attempt to prove something?" "No," he said calmly. "It's to make sure he never questions whether I chose him." She studied him carefully. There was no spotlight attached to the decision, no public acknowledgement, just quiet correction. The real twist wasn't dramatic. It was consistent action over time. Healing didn't look like grand gestures. It looked like shared grocery runs, shared pediatric appointments, shared exhaustion. It looked like conversations that didn't end in avoidance. It looked like apologies backed by pattern change. One evening, months after the hospital, Karen found herself leaning against him on the couch while Orion slept between them. She noticed it, didn't move immediately. "You're different," she said softly. "So are you," he replied. She smiled faintly. "That's probably good." He didn't push for labels. He didn't rush intimacy. He understood something now he didn't before. Love isn't proven in declarations. It's proven in consistency. Karen turned toward him fully. "I don't forget what happened," she said. "I don't want you to," he replied. "Why?" "Because I need to remember who I almost became." That answer settled something inside her. She leaned forward slowly, not out of desperation, not out of nostalgia, out of choice. Their kiss wasn't fireworks. It was steady, intentional, earned. Orion shifted slightly in his sleep between them, and that was the real center of everything. Sometimes people fail, not because they don't love, but because they fear losing control. Fear makes people run from responsibility. Growth makes them return differently. Karen learned that strength isn't loud. its boundary. Elysian learned that leadership without presence is empty. Orion will grow up knowing two things. His mother chose resilience. His father chose accountability. And love, when rebuilt honestly, can be stronger than it was the first time. If this story meant something to you, if you believe redemption requires action, not just words, make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Michael's Stories. Because the real lessons aren't in the drama, they're in the decisions. And sometimes, the call you ignore today becomes the one that changes your life tomorrow.